Hello, everyone. Welcome to Kryptonized. My co-host, Amanda Whitcroft, and I are happy to announce that Tyler Winklevoss is on the show today. And he pretty much doesn't need an introduction. And what's most remarkable to me is this guy's been involved in two major social revolutions, the latest being crypto. Lightning does not strike twice, folks. This guy is the real deal. So I'm happy to have Tyler Winklevoss on. He is the co-founder and CEO of Gemini, one of the world's largest crypto exchanges. And you already know his story. So today, let's just jump right into it. We're going to discuss three primary things. One, the future of DeFi. Two, NFTs and the future of NFTs. And three, what's going on in crypto with regulation today, as well as what Tyler thinks is going to happen in the future. So with that, Tyler, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, Mark and Amanda. Happy to be here.
So Tyler, we're going to jump right into things. A lot of people are worried about inflation, and some people think that DeFi might be the answer. What are your thoughts around that?
So I agree that people should be worried about inflation, and especially given all the money printing. So I certainly am worried about it, and I think anyone who's not paying attention to that should look at the Fed's balance sheet and how much it's been expanding, not just during and after the pandemic, but also the decade leading up to it. So it seems to be a systemic issue that is bipartisan. Both parties have done a poor job in this respect. And ultimately, I think the best answer to it is opting out of the dollar in the form of Bitcoin, because the supply of Bitcoin is actually fixed. So similar to how gold is seen traditionally as a hedge to inflation, Bitcoin is the ultimate hedge to inflation, because gold is scarce, but its supply actually is slowly increasing, whereas Bitcoin supply is stuck at 21 million, and there's no technological breakthrough that will expand it. So if you're worried about inflation, check out Bitcoin and look into it, because I believe it's the best hedge to inflation in the world right now. I think of DeFi as slightly different. Bitcoin is decentralized gold in a way. It's like gold 2.0. So you could characterize it as DeFi or decentralized finance. But when I usually think of DeFi, I think of what's being built on top of Ethereum and other blockchains. And so if you think of Wall Street and your banking services and centralized finance, a lot of that, or all of that, is being rebuilt on top of the Ethereum blockchain. So you can, instead of going to a bank and borrowing money and getting underwritten, you can go to a protocol and send an Ether and borrow money there. And you're really interacting with smart contracts and computers, not humans and brick and mortar banks. And I think DeFi holds a lot of promise to level the playing field of banking, helping to bank the underbanked or unbanked. And also it can fix a lot of the problems that we saw with the GameStop saga, the idea of the little guy getting stopped out and how the establishment holds all the power and the cards. I think DeFi and a lot of those protocols being built on Ethereum holds the answer to all the shortcomings of Wall Street. So I sort of think of like Bitcoin as your answer to inflation, and DeFi as your answer to everything that's wrong or not really fair in Wall Street and finance.
Okay, but Bitcoin can't do it all, right? I mean, if you look at how governments just print money, Bitcoin is, like, I agree with you, it's more like a digital gold, but you also need the banking system for things. You need other things that are related to finance in order to continue to finance your life or borrow money, or just about anything that's going on in Wall Street. So maybe it's a combination of the two, Bitcoin and DeFi. And some people say like there's Sovereign is on Bitcoin. That's kind of a DeFi-ish type type technology. So would you say both are needed, or just Bitcoin is
Yeah,
needed?
like I think, look, there's Bitcoin. It could all happen on Bitcoin, but the Bitcoin community has been very conservative in terms of adopting smart contracts and sort of what's considered Turing complete, the ability to run decentralized applications. And so a lot of that's been happening on Ethereum. So right now it looks like a combination of Bitcoin, Ethereum. There's other chains that are trying to do this as well, like Polkadot, Solana, Tezos, and they have smart contracting languages as well. But it looks like it won't just be Bitcoin right now. So I actually own Bitcoin, I own Ether, I own other coins as well. And I think there's probably not, 1,000 layer one chains in the future, but there's probably a combination of a few. And decentralization is a trade-off. And so to have high throughput and scalability but be fully decentralized is hard. So it's a bit of a spectrum, and there's different projects experimenting along the spectrum. Ethereum being one of them, Solana being one of them, Polkadot as well. And on top of those chains, what you're talking about, the basic financial services are being rebuilt so that people can get credit and they can get the certain services that they've come to be accustomed to at the bank, or they can't get at their bank because the bank just won't take them on as a customer for whatever reason. So they're just shut out of the system. So I think, so basically kind of like, that's a long-winded way of saying, if you're looking at crypto, definitely look at Bitcoin, but also definitely look at Ethereum. And I think right now, if you start there, these are two of the oldest, so they're almost blue chip in a way in terms of crypto lifespan. And you have a lot of bases covered because so many projects are being built on top of Ethereum. And by owning Ether, it's like indexing that whole ecosystem. So I almost think of it like if you think of land in Manhattan, owning the land and people are building skyscrapers, you have a piece of the underlying ecosystem without having to bet on each DeFi project itself, because ultimately, if all of DeFi works out on Ethereum, then Ether will be more valuable long term.
Mm-hmm. And Tyler, you and your brother wrote the foreword for CryptoDad. So you've also been very outspoken about the recent infrastructure bill involving crypto. Can you just briefly explain the regulation issues it brings up and what you believe the direction of regulation will be?
Yeah, so we from day one, so how we got into this is we started by buying Bitcoin. But a lot of that Bitcoin that we bought, we actually bought in Mt. Gox. And anyone who used Mt. Gox back in the day, it was a pretty scary experience. You'd wire money overseas to Japan. You had to apostille documents to KYC yourself. The exchange would brown out sometimes for like 12 hours. So you couldn't, sometimes your order would take minutes to place. So the infrastructure was really sketchy and scary, especially if you were keeping value there or purchasing value. So our idea was that would have to change for crypto and this incredible technology to take off. So that's how we started Gemini, to build this infrastructure in the US that was regulated. And our feeling was that like the right amount of regulation builds the healthiest markets. So we just think of it as thoughtful regulation. Too little, it's a Wild West, and too much, that's so draconian, it sort of stamps out the innovation. And so we've always tried to have a dialogue early on with regulators to help them, educate them, but also shape regulation in a way that was thoughtful, that actually fostered innovation. And when you look at the healthiest, most vibrant markets in the world, usually it's because of thoughtful regulation. Singapore, the US, the UK, for the most part, historically, they've got it pretty right with financial markets. And that's why, and they have strong legal systems and legal recourse. And that's ultimately why a lot of economic activity has happened there. So we've been involved in conversations federally, statewide with regulation, most notably with the New York DFS, Department of Financial Services, that regulates Gemini, because you don't want to end up on one extreme of the spectrum. And just sort of like going straight to the most recent thing that a lot of the crypto community was talking about, the crypto bill. If I'm sort of brushing my memory off, it was actually like a month or two ago, but in crypto years, that's like an eternity. Things move so fast, it's sort of like dog years. But essentially, the definition of broker that would have to report to the government sort of customer information was too broad. And so company like Gemini or Coinbase, we are kind of like brokers in the securities world. We're kind of like an E-Trade. We're more than that. But like, we have customers, we have records, we can do financial reporting. But if you're a node operator or a miner, it's just not applicable to you. You don't necessarily have customers. You can't comply. And so if you have to comply and there's ambiguity around it, you either have to take the position that like, I can't comply, and what if the regulators come after me for whatever reason? And if you're scared, then maybe you just leave the US and you go to Singapore, you go to somewhere in Europe, and you do the same thing, but there's no ambiguity around around complying to something that you actually can't physically comply to. So the danger is that when we get regulation wrong, it could scare entrepreneurs or push them offshore. And so the economic value that they create, like hopefully they're successful. The idea is that like entrepreneurs, some of them would be very successful. They're going to spend money. They're going to add to the GDP. They're going to add to the economy. All of that economic activity will just go somewhere else. They have to eat. They go to restaurants. They go to bodegas and whatnot. And so, like, if an entrepreneur is successful or a company is successful, then it employs a lot of people. There's a positive ripple effect, and you want that to happen in America. You don't want to push it offshore. So the infrastructure bill was this flashpoint to sort of make sure that we get this right, and we don't stifle innovation or push it offshore. And we talked about, and that is very much CryptoDad, or Chris Giancarlo, who's the former chairman of the CFTC. He's been very pro-crypto and thoughtful regulation, and he really wants to get this right. And we've gotten to know him over the years through the industry, and he uses analogies to the space race in the U.S. and how we got that right. And there's the internet. America won the internet. A lot of the biggest companies and the biggest drivers of the U.S. economy happened here. They were created here, and all of that wealth creation happened here because the internet was lightly regulated in a thoughtful way. There's Section 230, which is famous, which sort of immunized platforms from being sued for the content that was posted on them by their users. And it allowed Facebook, Twitter, Google, all these things to flourish. And I think the point here is we want the internet of money and crypto to flourish as well. And just because we won the internet, we can't get complacent. This is going to be different. It doesn't mean we're going to, all the blockchain innovation is going to happen here. It's going to happen here if we are smart and do things the right way. And that's really the concern that everyone has.
Yeah, the thing is, with the internet, we were only disintermediating the media at the time. Now we're disintermediating the government. You don't think they're going to fight back really hard on this? I know some people get it. There's quite a few politicians that get it. But when we start messing with the currency and their right to regulate and print money and all that, do you feel like there's a strong force that's against us?
Well, there's definitely a lot of scrutiny right now on stablecoins in the sense that, yes, very much the currency's been the purview or the mandate of the government, and they love that mandate and control, right? Nobody wants to give up that, or governments don't want to give up that. Though I don't think that Bitcoin is ever going to be outlawed in the U.S. And Bitcoin is considered a commodity like gold, so it's stateless money, and I don't actually think it competes with the dollar. But yeah, look, governments don't like to give up power, and so asking them to, or disintermediating them the currency, this is something they're going to look hard at. They're going to want to be a part of it. Obviously, governments love to tax, so the infrastructure bill is basically figuring out how to tax a new industry to pay for infrastructure. And I think it's always going to be this tension between big government, less government, more freedom, less freedom. And I think crypto is that beautiful, elegant checks and balances. You can opt out of the U.S. government in a way by storing your wealth and your life force in stateless money, and very much Bitcoin is the separation of money and state, like the separation of church and state. It is ushering in that new era, and I think that competition is really healthy. It keeps everyone honest, and it gives people options. The worst is these extreme situations where people they have no choice but to deal with the Zimbabwean dollar, which is hyperinflated. So if they have Bitcoin, or they can move to Ether, or DAI, which is an algorithmic stablecoin, or even the Gemini dollar, which is a one-to-one backed peg stablecoin, then at least they have a fighting chance. So, I'm not sure that government currencies don't have a place in the future. I'm definitely worried about the health of all fiat regimes, given the amount of money printing and the debt servicing, and just the breach of trust that the inflation is going to bring about because of that. But ultimately, I'm a fan of options and choices, because you can have freedom to say whatever you want. But if you are dependent on one currency, like if you don't have independence, then how free are you? So I think that choice is a really important part of that. And I think that's really what crypto brings in. It just gives people choice.
Yeah, I look at what happened with Cyprus and Greece, where they went in the middle of the night and just stole the money out of people's accounts. And I look at I think the bill has been introduced to watch anyone making a $600 deposit or more in the United States. And it's getting pretty interesting. I think you'd agree, whether you want to do so publicly. So,
Tyler, I know Nifty Gateway is an NFT marketplace owned by Gemini, and I just want to know what makes Nifty Gateway different from other NFT platforms.
Yeah, great question. So Nifty is similar to Gemini in that you can buy, store, and sell assets, but in the case of Nifty Gateway, it's NFTs. In the case of Gemini, it's fungible assets like Bitcoin, Ether. Ultimately, we believe that Nifty Gateway has a great user experience and design. So you don't have to own crypto to buy an NFT. You can actually put your credit card in and pay with cash. So it's like a non-crypto expert experience. Very shortly, you'll be able to link up your MetaMask wallet as well, so you can pay with Ether. And so we're going to have a whole menu of ways to actually purchase NFTs. And the NFTs at Nifty Gateway are actually stored on the same cold storage infrastructure that stores Bitcoin for Gemini. So a lot of people now have material wealth in NFTs. They've put a lot of money in, or the NFTs they have appreciated, and they have a lot of value. So they can store NFTs on Nifty Gateway that are actually stored by Gemini. So There's a security component. There's a user experience and ease of use. It's just simple and easy and reliable. And also, we've been very focused on content. Content is king. So we started this concept early on about drops, similar to what you see in like sneaker culture, sneaker drops. And we started this drops where we got great content creators to build content in these moments in time. And so Beeple started a Nifty Gateway and established himself there, and then sold the $70 million NFT on Christie's because of how well he did on Nifty Gateway. Pac, Mad Dog Jones, a lot of these artists were digital artists, and because of blockchain technology, they could actually sell their pieces and create the scarcity around them. And they started doing that Nifty Gateway. But as things go on, we're going to look to continue to open up the platform more into more NFT content that is less sort of curated by us, but just built by the community of creators. But basically, like, NFTs are art on the blockchain, collectibles, all these things that are one of a kind. We all grew up collecting baseball cards, magic cards, whatever that is. And all of a sudden with blockchain technology, you can create a 1 of 1, you can create a 10 of 10, and bring all that creativity onto a blockchain and create scarcity around it and authenticity. And so Nifty Gateway is like that marketplace for it, similar to how Gemini is a marketplace for Bitcoin and Ether.
Right. And you and your brother recently bought a creature NFT. Is that right?
Yeah.
You're a creature.
Creature world, Robotos. I don't know how you pronounce it, Robotos. But it's really cool because there are these communities that are developing around memes, and it is really fascinating to sort of see it's human nature and behavior. We've been creating art since we've been in caves. We've been collecting art forever. So I think, NFTs and Nifty Gateway are very much just a logical progression of humanity. And, so if Bitcoin was the first of its kind, like a digital gold, and then Ether is what you need to buy the computing power of the Ethereum supercomputer, that Ether is kind of like digital oil. We've seen people put stock securities on crypto blockchains and all of it. And so it's just kind of like the natural progression is that, of course, people are going to put collectibles that are rare and scarce and memorabilia and art and memes and because that's just what makes humans humans. It's our neocortex that gives us language and creativity, and that's why that sort of makes humans different animals in the animal kingdom than every other animal.
So if I'm a little, Amanda knows this, I'm a little skeptical of NFT, what I call 1.0. I've been in the industry for a while. I do think, though, once we hit this second generation of NFTs and I think they'll be more programmable. We're already starting to see some of this, that more mainstream adoption will take place. Do you have any thoughts as to what a next generation NFT looks like? Or do you just think I'm full of it and NFT first generation is good enough?
Well, it's definitely, I think you're right in the sense that this is probably just the beginning. Because NFTs are programmable, there's an infinite amount of ways you can slice them. So an NFT could change color in 100 years, on a birthday. The sky's sort of the limit of what you can do and how you could potentially tie it into real world experiences or whatnot. And I think we're still learning and everyone's exploring, but there's so many creative people doing this at the same time that it's just going to move quite fast and be pretty incredible. I also think this is probably a good segue to talk about like the concept of a virtual world or a metaverse, as it's often called. And it's great to collect and speculate on NFTs and whatnot, but then you're probably going to want to bring them with you into a virtual world and show them off or whatnot. And so people are already going into centralized virtual worlds like Fortnite, going to raves. Marshmallow spins a DJ, hang out with your friends on Friday night. If I was 12 years old, I'd probably be doing that. That would be a Friday night. And it's super cool, but that's controlled by one company and whatnot. Whereas there's decentralized worlds like Somnium Cube, Sandbox, Decentraland, where they have currencies. You can purchase the land. It's finite. And ultimately, the idea is you can bring in your NFTs. You could go to Gemini district. Gemini has an office, let's say, in a district. You could trade your Bitcoin in the virtual world. So it's like the 3D or 4D internet. And sort of like the way I think about this is, I grew up with Nintendo and Sega Genesis, and you couldn't really take the flute in Mario Brothers into like the other game title, or certainly not into a Sega game title. And so there was digital goods that you'd win, but they were ephemeral and they weren't interoperable. And now NFTs, this idea that you can bring them in different worlds and own them and sell them, it's going to create microeconomies, and it already is. And the one really cool promise is that in the U.S., for the most part, there's an idea that you can create wealth, get a job, make a living, right? It's a decent assumption. It doesn't completely hold true. But there's other parts of the world where you can't. But if you go into a virtual world, you could perform tasks and services, get paid, for a startup like Gemini, get paid in crypto, and actually make a living when you absolutely have no chance of doing so if you were confined to the geography of where you actually lived. The legal system, the economy, whatever, the government, it's too uncertain. There's no opportunity, but all of a sudden you can exit into a cloud state or a cloud economy and make a living. Which is pretty incredible. And so the metaverse is, it's cool and it's fun, and we can hang out and, go on dates and go to raves and all that cool stuff. But for some people, it actually may be a completely different life opportunity that does not exist. So there's some huge promise. And of course, the decentralized version of that that's owned by the users is much better than the centralized version, a la Ready Player One, where, what is it? Innovative Industries is this one evil company that could control it. You don't really want that. You want the decentralized version of that.
Yeah. And speaking of these like debut concerts and innovative ways to do this, you and your brother's band Mars Junction recently had a debut concert at the Knitting Factory in Brooklyn. And so that was captured as a living photo, sold as an NFT. I mean, first of all, how did it feel to be performing with your brother and have such success together with Gemini? And second of all, will we be hearing more from Mars Junction in the coming months? I mean, do you see that music is becoming a bigger player in the NFT space in the future?
Yeah, so one, it was amazing. I've never sung in a band, so it's kind of a COVID project. We both grew up playing piano. Cameron picked up guitar in college and then really got back into it 5 years ago. And he's really into electric guitar, sort of Eddie Van Halen shredding kind of stuff. And so we formed this band. It was a lot of fun, but you're absolutely right. There was a photographer who was there, took the picture of a concert, and then put up on an NFT on the blockchain. And so, I don't know if it sold, but I think there were some bids on it. So he captured this moment in an asset that was really cool. And I never met the guy, just kind of saw it on Twitter. Someone brought it to my attention. So that's super cool. The whole music world is fascinated by NFTs because it's this idea to remonetize music, streaming. They just don't make a lot of money the way they used to. So it sort of went from one extreme where CDs, musicians made a lot of money, but consumers really paid the price because you wanted one song on the album and you had to pay $25. Back in the day when $25 was really, it's like $250 today. I mean, $20 in the 90s was like a real $20. and you would go into Sam Goody and you'd buy this CD, but you couldn't buy the single usually. And then Napster sort of disrupted that. And now we pay $9 a month on Spotify. The problem is the artists don't really make what they used to. So NFTs are new content and a new way for them to ultimately monetize. If you have a brand or IP, whether you're a film studio or a musician, there's huge possibility for you to be able to monetize yourself and go direct to the consumer without all of the middlemen and whatnot. So it definitely, that's absolutely right. And I think there was a third question that I'm forgetting now.
I guess what do you see as the future of do you see music becoming a bigger player in the NFT space?
Oh, okay. I remember. I'll answer that as well. So we performed our first concert in Brooklyn in July, and then with Delta, everything kind of got a little bit weird with venues and whatnot. So I think we're going to plan kind of a tour, a bunch of different spots, maybe in different cities. We're going to aim for this spring. So there will be more from Art Junction. If you want to follow it, we actually are on Instagram. I haven't posted a lot there, but it's at Mars, M-A-R-S, Junction, so you can follow. And then as soon as we get some venue dates and, where we're going to be when this spring, we'll put there so people can follow and join. But ultimately, look, I think music's a huge part of the human experience. There's very few people who don't love music. I mean, it's just part of us. And the cool thing about NFTs is the combination of music. So we've had DJs like on Nifty Gateway, deadmau5, Steve Aoki work with visual artists to create the soundtrack for the visual NFT. And it's really cool because you can't put a soundtrack on a Warhol necessarily. There's limitations. So there's things you can do in the digital sphere with motion, with sound, and whatnot that you can only do in the NFT medium. So I absolutely think Spotify. So if music went from CDs and Tower Records to iTunes Store to Spotify, there may be another evolution where you purchase the album art as an NFT, or you purchase a song as an NFT, or bits and pieces of a song, and they're scarce. And that's actually what streaming looks like in the future. In some ways, Nifty Gateway is kind of like a combination of Spotify, Netflix, and Amazon, all kind of rolled up in one, because it's content, it's a marketplace, and it's ultimately a pipe from artists to their audiences and any type of artist. So we're sort of learning as it goes, but I think we've already seen a lot of cool collaborations between not unlikely characters, but digital artists lived in their world and DJs lived in their world, and now they're selling things for 7 figures, millions of dollars, working together, and it's really cool. And that just didn't happen before NFTs. People didn't sell his digital art before NFTs because he couldn't. There was no way to buy it. How do I grab it? It's not an asset. Where's the four corners of it? And the blockchain technology brought that scarcity to his incredible work. And so that combination allowed him to actually sell his digital art. And so I think we're just going to see more amazing new things like that.
Let's move on to the last part, our last section before we do a lightning round. And that is the adoption of crypto. Now, obviously, in the last couple of years, we've seen an acceleration. What do you think, and I'll give an example of El Salvador, just using, adopting that as one of their primary currencies. What do you think it's going to take to get, the first billion people to use cryptocurrency? What do you think, what events need to happen?
That's a great question. I think there are a couple catalysts. I think inflation's a big one. We certainly saw a lot of folks who got close to getting into Bitcoin in 2017 and 2018 in that run up. And a lot of these folks are dyed-in-the-wool Wall Street sort of skeptics. And they got close, but they didn't jump in 2018. And then there was a recorrection in the market, and there was crypto winter for about 18 months. And then as soon as there was a day or two where the markets melted in the pandemic, I think it was March or April. As soon as things stabilized, those folks came running back to Gemini and I'm sure other places to buy Bitcoin because they were so spooked at what was happening with the dollar and the money printing. As I said before, leading up to the pandemic, and then you're on the turbo button for 10 years. And then how do we get through the pandemic? Oh, we got to smash the turbo button again. And it's just simple arithmetic. Like if you add more dollars to the supply, the dollars that you hold are just less scarce. They're worth less. So that stampeded a lot of people into Bitcoin. There's certainly a crowd that loves DeFi and Ethereum. I think the people around the world who don't have access to the financial system in the same way that you might if you live in the U.S., getting a loan, getting a mortgage, getting credit, those folks are finding DeFi. Also, the yields in DeFi, when you think of like the 0 to negative interest rates in a savings account in a bank, compared to you can use Gemini Earn and potentially earn up to 7% or 8% on your Gemini dollars or your Dogecoin. I think we're at 2% for your Bitcoin. That's a lot better than your bank provides you. So that's pushing people in. And then NFTs is a whole nother segment that everybody wants to collect cool things. So I feel like everyone's got a different, thing. It's really personal, what you're worried about, what you're thinking about. But I think it all is additive. There is a lot of tribalism in crypto, or some people have that, like, oh, everything outside Bitcoin's a waste of time. And people get a little too maximalist. But yeah. I actually think it all like helps each other. I think they don't compete. I think Bitcoin plays its role. I think DeFi plays its role. I think NFTs are playing their role, and they're breaking down people's perceptions, their barriers, and ultimately, like, people have to educate themselves when they hear about these things and they go into them. So I think it's a rising tide lifts all the boats, and the NFT movement I thought would happen for sure. Obviously, we wouldn't have been building Nifty Gateway and whatnot, but I didn't think it would happen so fast. In literally less than a year, NFTs would be selling for millions of dollars, let alone $70 million. I mean, Beeple is now one of the 3 living artists who've sold the highest price. So I think it's him, David Hockney, and Jeff Koons. I didn't think an NFT artist would establish himself so quick and so fast. But anyway, I'm rambling a little bit. I think it all fascinates me, and I think it all helps each other out. And I see it as like holistically, and I see the differences, different problem spaces that each is trying to attack. And I think it's really the eye of the beholder. If you're a musician, if you're an artist, NFTs is probably the way, that's going to sort of suck you into it. But if you live in Venezuela, Argentina with hyperinflation and an unreliable local currency, then it could be Bitcoin or a combination of DeFi. So I think it's like very personal, and it depends like who's basically letting you down, right now, and what are your frustrations, and then okay, I'll tell you what crypto you're probably most interested in.
I agree with everything you just said. I think there's a couple of barriers to entry. One, we've invented these new languages just for the cryptocurrency community. So anybody outside of this is like, what are you talking about, right? If my grandmother doesn't understand it, it's just not simple enough. The second is just getting on board to buy these things. Now, Nifty Gateway, I understand you use a credit card, but for the most part with cryptocurrency, it's not that simple. And so we've got to figure out a way to make it a lot simpler. I know there's regulations that limit us, but we've got to make it simple. That's my opinion on the adoption question. So I'm going to ask you 4 questions, and then Amanda's going to give us our closing thoughts and maybe a few questions around that. So these are just short answers, Tyler.
Okay.
And first thing that comes to mind, okay? First 2 are winner or loser questions. So the first one is winner or loser, enterprise DeFi.
What do you mean by that?
Well, that was my question I had. So this is where decentralized finance is leaking into the enterprise. Now, I think that means centralization. Mm-hmm. So how could it be enterprise DeFi? But I guess there are some companies out there that are decentralized, helping the enterprise transact with businesses better.
Oh, yeah. I mean, so I believe that crypto's been a retail phenomenon. It's been an individual phenomenon from day one. And so it's really been a movement about the individual. And there was a lot of talk around like it's the blockchain, it's not the asset. It's all about the blockchain and private blockchains. But ultimately private blockchains without a crypto, without being decentralized, are just databases, distributed databases, which we've had for a long, long time. And it's not really like a crypto. So I think Nick Szabo said this well. He's a thought leader in cryptocurrency, and he pioneered some really cool stuff before Bitcoin. But he talks about certain stable coins as a doll is to a baby. It's not the same thing. It's not a real cryptocurrency. And so you can take your own position. Is a stable coin like Gemini dollar with a 1-to-1 back? There is a centralization component to it, but it does bring dollars onto the blockchain, and people want to spend dollars. So it's a price that some people want to pay, and it's a product that we provide. It's not a cryptocurrency like Bitcoin. So when you lose the decentralized aspect and it becomes centralized, it loses its cryptocurrency properties. And so I'm very skeptical of that, and it's a slippery slope.
Yeah. Okay. Remember, these are lightning rounds.
Yeah. I know.
All right. Winner or loser? The SEC's fight with DeFi.
So I say either win or lose, or how does
Yep. You think the SEC is going to win the fight with DeFi or not?
I mean, I don't think it's a binary thing. I think that there's going to be some projects that have to come into compliance, and ultimately there will be some middle ground. So I think there's going to have to be a path that we find, and I think it's not going to be like DeFi is the internet, right? So you can't just like regulate the internet away and win against the internet. But I also think that DeFi is going to have to work with the regulators. So I think it's not a win or a lose. It's going to be come together and figure out the path forward to be compliant and regulated.
Okay, fair enough.
Is that short enough? Is that short enough answer? I'm getting shorter.
Maybe a little bit shorter. So you have famously said we're going to see Bitcoin 500,000. My question is, when do you think that's going to happen?
Definitely in the decade, could be within the next 5 years.
All right, my last question. Who is Satoshi Nakamoto?
That is a good question. I do not know, and if I did, I probably couldn't tell you.
All right, Amanda, over to you with closing thoughts.
All right, Tyler, what advice do you have for people just getting into crypto?
Definitely take the time to learn. I think the biggest risk is not paying attention or getting involved on some level. And I will shamelessly plug the Gemini credit card, where you can earn crypto back. It's coming to market very soon. You can join the waitlist now, but we're inside a month of being live. But the idea is you can swipe your credit card. Let's say you buy something at Best Buy, and you can earn 2 to 3% back in Bitcoin or Ether. So without changing your habits, instead of earning airline miles or points with whatever, who knows the exchange rates are, you can start stacking crypto. So it's an easy way to get in. And I think people say, oh, how did you have like the risk appetite to get into Bitcoin or crypto? I'm like, how do you have the risk appetite to not? This is the internet of money. It's the next internet. It's something you want to be a part of. I would start looking at Bitcoin and Ether first, but definitely like don't blow it off. It's sort of like blowing off the internet in the early 90s and not having exposure to Amazon, Google, Microsoft, and whatnot. Like you don't want to be that person. And there's very good ways, like the Gemini credit card, to dip your toes in a way that doesn't require you to take a big risk or make a big investment.
Great. And last but not least, what do you think the price of Bitcoin will be by the end of this year?
Ooh, where is it today? Let's see. These things are always really hard to predict, and but whatever, I'll just go. I mean,
I throw any number out there.
Yeah, I think 100 grand's within the realm.
It's 49,000 today. So go from there.
It could be 30. It could be 100. I know that's like kind of a cop out answer, but what I've crypto tends to do really well into the holiday season. I don't know if it's because people are home, during Thanksgiving and trading and talking to family members and proselytizing crypto, but last year we ended up like really strong. It was roaring into the new year, and I feel really good about the support and the fundamentals and everything that's happening across crypto, NFTs, Ether, and whatnot. So I think we could finish the year pretty strong.
I just find it hilarious that Tyler didn't even know what the price was. I think that's a testament to your long-term investment strategy with Bitcoin.
Yeah, and that's one thing I would say is like, don't get in if you think this is a day-to-day thing. Get in if you're in here for the long term. 5-10 years, because that's really what this is. It's a long game.
All right. So with that, Tyler, really appreciate your time.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for taking the time to answer some of our questions. I learned a lot, especially your view on DeFi, NFTs, and what you're doing at Gemini, and I know Amanda has. So again, thank you, and really appreciate you joining us.
Yeah, you've been so wonderful. Thank you, Tyler.
Yeah, thanks for the conversation and having me. I really, really enjoyed the time with you both.